I think we've beaten Piers Morgan.
That's no problem, is it, really?
So,
it's not difficult. Yeah.
As usual, I'll start off with a few questions,
right,
and then we'll open it up to the audience to carry on.
Yeah.
And so to start off with a tough one, do you ever have fun?
All the time, yeah. In all different ways, yeah. Of course, it depends what you call fun. I mean, you have fun sometimes when you've got nothing to do, lunchtime, and everybody's gone to lunch, and I think it's time to give Morgan a bashing or something on Twitter. So that's fun. And flying my aeroplanes when I fancy, getting up in the sky somewhere, and when no one can get hold of you, no one can talk to you, no one can drive you mad. And having said that, the air traffic, I went to Jersey for the first time. I think the first time I went to Jersey, my parents took me there when I was about 10. And so I went there in June. And so that's 58 years later. And when I took off from there, the air traffic controller went through all the usual spiel, turn right, turn left, climb 5,000 feet, go on a heading of this, that, and the other. And before he handed me over to London Information, he couldn't resist it. He said, "You're fired." And I said, that is not correct communication for an air traffic controller. And if there was an accident and the black box had to be investigated afterwards, your voice would be in there saying, he said, "Well, I'm only joking." I said, "Yeah, well, it's not that funny. I've heard it before."
There you go.
Very...
So
very novel, isn't it?
So original. So you mentioned Piers Morgan, and we had Piers Morgan here last term. And earlier this afternoon, we tweeted a photo of the chamber when it was empty, and you might have seen he responded saying, "I suspect that's as full as it'll get."
Yeah.
How did the feud between the two of you start?
Well, it's not really a feud. I mean, I've known him for many, many years. He's just slightly obnoxious character he's actually quite a good bloke. He's actually quite a good fellow, but he's a bit obnoxious, so needs a slapping every so often. And when you see him being a bit stupid, I consider that I am performing a service for the nation, really, in keeping him under control.
But in the same way in which winners of Britain's Got Talent normally don't go on to have long-lasting success, the first 6 winners of The Apprentice didn't end up working for your companies for longer than 3 years. Do you think that the show isn't effective at finding good employees, or do you think that you're just a difficult person to work with?
No, I mean, the process is excellent, and all those, I mean, the first lots of people, I mean, I don't know what you're alluding to, but the point is the first winner stayed and worked for me for 2 years, then decided to go and work for himself, has got a successful business. And in fact, the other day we did one of these young people's events called Periscope, whatever that is, on Twitter, took over the Twitter headquarters. The second winner was Michelle Dewberry, and she worked for me for about a year and a bit, and she's a TV presenter now. From time to time, is also running her own business. The third winner, Simon Ambrose, worked for me for 2.5 years, and now in my property division, and then runs his own property portfolio. So, you want me to carry on? Yeah. So you're wrong. Yeah. Lee McQueen, 4th winner, worked for me for about 2 years, also now running his own business. Even runners-up have done very well. Claire Young, she's got a great business also. She was a runner-up.
But the candidates for the show, are they really chosen based on their business acumen, or is it who will make good TV?
I think the point is the producers most probably start off by interviewing these people with an interest in mind that they should be entertaining. But it's my rules. I have the final say from the CVs and all that stuff of who gets in. And I kind of have a rule, really, that says there has to be some credible candidates amongst them, and that's it. So, and we do end up with credible candidates.
So only some of them have to be credible.
Well, I'm not going to be pinned down to numbers, really. And as I spoke to you earlier on when we got here, I said I'm here to do a Q&A for the benefit of all these people here, and I hope that we're not going to be talking about The Apprentice all night long. Yeah, there are other things that I have done in life, but I'm quite happy to talk about it. And if you really want to know about it, you can. How many people here? 400. You can all go out and buy my book tomorrow, which is all about The Apprentice.
No, fair enough. I mean, so moving swiftly on from the politics of the boardroom to the politics of the country, you resigned from the Labour Party after the general election, and you said that if Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister, that you would leave the country. I'm sure that Piers Morgan is working extra hard to support Jeremy Corbyn right now. But what do you think the chances are of you having to pack up your bags and leave?
Well, the thing is that if you look at the French model, this Francois, whatever his name is, what's his name? Francois, yeah, him. He took over from that other chap, and he immediately instigated very anti kind of business policies, really. With the net effect of most of the business people just leaving France, had enough, and they just went out. Now, we create employment, and if we lose interest, right, why would I be wanting to work into a place, or anybody which has an enterprise culture want to work in an environment where one has to give 80% of its earnings away to a government? Those were the days of back in the Harold Wilson days of the Labour days many, many years ago. And I remember where, believe it or not, if you earned, an enterprising person earned over £100,000 a year, for every £1 over the 100,000, you paid 99p in tax. Now, that's not very encouraging, as you can imagine. And consequently, it created an era of a non-enterprise culture. 50 years ago, the Jeremy Corbyns of this world were needed, I think, or 60 years ago, they were needed. Employees, not necessarily in London, but in other places, in coal mines, in shipbuilding, and car building, car assembly, and the real manufacturing is, but they needed protecting. There was no employment protection, right? But now, 50 years on, 60 years on, we have so much protection of the employees now. You can't just suddenly fire somebody and say go. There's redundancy pay. There are procedures upon which people, management has to go through before people can be put out of work. And so those are the old days. They've done it. We've been there. We've been with the Arthur Scargills and all that stuff. It's the modern day environment is not like that. There's enough protection for people, not to mention human rights and all the other stuff. It doesn't need a government to try and impose it upon people. And the stealing from the rich and paying the poor, that's a false economy also, because the rich, even if they did pay 90% tax, wouldn't touch the sides in what is needed to run the economy of the country. Wouldn't touch the sides, quite frankly. Mm-hmm.
So, in your opinion then, do you think there isn't really a place, for example, for trade unions in the modern day and age?
There is a place for trade unions to a certain extent. They have to represent their members. But the old-fashioned trade union, I think, has kind of dwindled away a little bit. If you're too young to well, you may have to read it in the history, but the dock strikes, for example, would bring the country to its knees. Recently, more recent times, say 5 or 6 years ago, the underground had a leader who was one of the highest paid union leaders in the world, fighting on behalf of his members, would just bring them out on strike while he was enjoying lobster and caviar lunches. No, I'm not joking, right? And he was talking about his poor, oppressed members. There's not too many of them at the moment, but there's things like nurses' unions and doctors' unions. Definitely, I think are very important. I mean, I saw some doctors talking on, I think it was Breakfast TV. I think it was yesterday, about how they are perhaps exploited in the NHS, and how can they strike? They can't strike really, but that's the dilemma that they have. Same with the ambulance people and the fire people. They need representing, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Final question from me for the moment, which is, you've said that if you wanted to be loved, you'd get Tinder. Do you have Tinder?
No, I don't. I've got my dear wife of 46 years, or 47 years, 48 years. Yeah, 48 years. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to open it out to questions from the audience. If you would like to ask a question, please put your hand up high and wait for Harrison with a microphone to come round to you before you start speaking.
One of the most impressive elements of your career is the fact that you went so far given the short length of time you were actually in school. Do you feel that the school system let you down? And if you had any advice to our current education ministers, what would it be?
Well, the school system didn't let me down. Not at all. In fact, the school I went to in 1960s was a modern, it was an evolution on schooling. We used to have what we called secondary modern and grammar schools. The grammar school people all ended up here, and in the secondary modern schools they ended up in the factory. That's putting it very blunt, very bluntly. And then came out this middle of the road school, comprehensive school, where I can honestly say that you could, if you wanted to, learn how to build a brick wall right the way up to take part in a Shakespearean play. It was fantastic. And the opportunity was there for me to continue and stay on to do A-levels and all that stuff, but I got a bit restless and wanted to go out and get a job and work. Coming from a working class background, family, it was alien to them also in those days to support a child, if you like, beyond the age of 16 and expect them to go out and work and provide some income to the family. And to be fair to my parents, I'm the youngest of 4 children, and the other 3 went out to work and had to contribute to the family. To be fair to my parents, they kind of signed on to the fact that to let me stay on at school longer than 14 and a half years old, where you could have left, to 16. So in those days, there was GCEs and kind of a GCE plus, if you like, and then A-levels. And the GCE plus was where you would, in maths, for example, it would be halfway between the GCE and GCA level. There was like a halfway house. So that's the kind of area that I left. I try to tell my young people when I travel around the country talking to young audiences at schools, not necessarily at universities like this, that when they're at school, and even my grandchildren, and when they're at school, there is nothing else for them to do other than go to school. And it's there, it's free, if you like, and you should absorb and take in everything that is being offered to you, instead of doing what I did in the French lessons and look out the window in the playground watching the people playing football, okay? And of course, when I started my business and opened my French office for the first time, it was the dummy, me. You know, I was the dummy. And I think back on all that wasted time, and you can't explain that to young people, I'm afraid. It's difficult to get through to them that in that period of time up to 16, they should try and absorb and take stuff in. My school was a great school. I was not disadvantaged in any way or form. It was up to me whether I wanted to go on and do A-levels, and it was up to me whether I wanted to leave. So there was nothing forcing me to do anything.
Just following up on that very quickly, if you're starting out in business today, do you think your road to success would have been the same?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, it's horses for courses. I started when I was 18 years old, around about then, and I opened my first factory when I was about 20, and I was able to manufacture electronic items in a factory in the East End of London with a little production line of girls, putting components into printed circuit boards and soldering them by hand, and people bolting them together into a metal chassis and then putting them in my van and taking them up to Tottenham Court Road and selling them. That was it. That's how you made things in those days, right? I know it sounds ridiculous at the moment when you look at your Apple iPhones being banged out at 20,000 pieces a second by using full automation and all that stuff. Could one start a mobile phone manufacturing company now in the back of my garage? No. But I would be able to start something else and manufacture something else. Don't worry about me, my friend. Plonk me in today. Take me back 50 years now, and I'm 18 years old. Do not worry about me. I will be there again.
I'm glad to hear it. On the front row over here.
In light of what you were saying about Jeremy Corbyn and taxation in general and punitive taxation of the rich, can we expect to see you join the Conservative Party anytime soon?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't see why I should, really. I mean, the thing is that I supported the Conservative Party under Thatcher. I was Mrs. Thatcher's blue-eyed boy. Well, I wasn't blue-eyed, but... and she would, as my wife would tell you, she would drag me around everywhere as a glowing example of the Thatcher era. Here is the East End boy done good, really, yeah? At 31 years old, I was the first public flotation on the London stock market, post all the Labour Party depression that was on before Thatcher had taken over. Things were getting better. The first flotation was me. She hauled me around like a little poodle, presenting me to people, and I was a great admirer of her because for what she did and for what she stood for, and continued to support the party through Mr. Major. And then along came Tony Blair with New Labour. And remember, I was brought up in the East End of Hackney with real working class people that were strong Labour supporters, and Labour was running through the whole family. And Blair came along with a very refreshing new way of looking at things. It's certainly from a marketing point of view, they went to the trouble of calling themselves New Labour in order to think, meaning dissociating themselves with old Labour, right? We're new. And what they were effectively a Conservative Party, a better one than the one that Major was proposing. And that's why I went over to them. And what's happened is over the period of time, they were in power for 13 years. I was a supporter of Blair and for a while, until I think he went off the rails a little bit with his shoulder-to-shoulder stuff with the Americans. And then Gordon Brown was a good friend, and I supported him also. Very unlucky he was that he took over just when the world collapsed around us in 2007. The whole of the world economy collapsed. Of course, it affected everybody, mortgages, banks, and all that type of thing. And that was it. He lost the election then, and then Batman and Robin took over with a coalition, and that clown Clegg was Deputy Prime Minister, I mean, every single thing he wanted to do, they kind of condescendingly said, yes, all right, we'll put it forward. And of course, it went nowhere. And I don't think there's one thing, one policy that he must have done to deal with in the prenuptial agreement that they signed that day to form the coalition that ever went through. And then Ed Miliband was voted as the Labour leader, and he's a nice fellow, Ed. I like him as a person, an individual. But the damage to the Labour Party was done in 2010 in voting him in instead of his brother. End of story. That's it. You know, unfortunately, that's what happened. And for the 5 years that he was the leader, he never inspired any confidence amongst the population. And you saw what happened in the landslide victory of the Conservative Party. I resigned from the party. I was in an awkward position because at the tail end of running up to the election of 2015, earlier part of this year, of course, I was being bombarded by the media to express my opinion on my support for the current regime, which I didn't agree with. Ed Balls and Ed Miliband's, I thought, wasn't very good. It didn't have a very good business policy. It didn't have a very good enterprise policy, and was leaning towards wooing, the people with the kind of Robin Hood approach again, rich and poor and all that stuff, mansion tax and all that kind of propaganda. And long before the election, I decided that I can't support these people, and I never went on any of their, party political broadcasts, and kept my head down. Having said that, I also felt that it was right of me not to express an opinion during the election process, because although I don't consider myself to be, unlike Mr. Morgan, who does, I don't consider myself to be God Almighty. But nevertheless, if I would have spoken out, I may have influenced people. And so I decided to keep quiet. And I kept completely quiet, kept my head down, as I said. And then as soon as the election was over and done and dusted, one way or another, I was going to resign, and I did. I resigned from the Labour Party and now sit on the independent benches in the House of Lords.
Can we go with one of the hands over in that corner?
There's a chap up there. You can shout if you haven't got a microphone.
As a businessman, will you be supporting the case for or against Britain leaving the EU? And could you please explain your reasoning? Thank you.
Explain what, sorry?
As a businessman, will you be supporting the case?
No, I got that bit. It was the last bit. It was the last bit. Will I explain my reasoning? Is that what you said? Okay, right. Okay, well, personally, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we weren't members of the European Community. And as a businessman, my reasoning would be that I recall if I wanted to export goods that I manufactured to France, there was a prohibitive import duty in France because they're very patriotic and they wouldn't accept our goods, and there was duty imposed on our goods. Similarly, there was duty imposed on other goods from France or from Italy coming into our country, and as a businessman, it cramped our style because our biggest export markets was the European market, and so free circulation of goods, as far as I'm concerned, is the best thing. Free circulation of business is the best thing about the European being in the European community. Free circulation of employment is also quite a good thing, allowing French people and English people and all that stuff to be able to go and work where they want to work without having to have work permits and all that stuff. So that's the good news. The bad news is that my opinion, if we're going to do something, what the government needs to do is to fight for some reforms whereby we are able to control our own destiny. In other words, we want our cake and eat it. Yeah, that's what I would say. We'd want our cake and eat it. And I don't want to have Brussels telling me about, some more stupid rules and regulations that I've got to adhere to, and we should make our own rules up as far as that's concerned. I don't know the exact details of it, but I mean, as an example, it's not possible for us to favour a British manufacturer if there's a contract going for trains. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. If we want to build new trains for the infrastructure in our country, we should give it to the British manufacturing industry. But you can't. You've got to open the door and you've got to allow tenders coming in from Belgians and Germans and French and all that stuff. And consequently, we lose lots of contracts. Now, our French cousins, they have a miraculous way of circumventing this. I don't know how they manage to do it, but when there's lots of contracts coming up for things, they find a way of arguing and disputing that the local community will benefit if the order for building that new school goes to a French building company. Well, they're right, actually, they're right. But in our country here, if there's a construction job comes out to refurbish the whole of Oxford, for example, it has to go to tender, and it may end up that a Japanese construction company or a Belgian construction company, not Japanese, let's say a Belgian or German construction company will get the job. So I think that's wrong, and I think we should be able to allow to favour our own people, favour our own companies for large government contracts.
Hi, I was wondering, what do you think is your position in the House of Lords, and also do you think you deserve that kind of political power?
Well, I've got no political power. I'm a member of the House of Lords because I was recognised for perhaps my expertise in commercial matters, okay? And the House of Lords is made up of a lot of people that have in life spent their whole career doing things. So we have lawyers, for example, who are clearly expert on the law. We have people that have run schools and headmasters and run the educational system. We have people who have been in the transport of the country. We have people that have been in the military. We have people that have been in the church. And so it's a culmination of a wealth of experience in there. And I was honoured to be chosen to be one of those people to sit there and add my tuppenny halfpennyworth when it comes to any debates or matters to do with enterprise or any bills that go through that have to do with commerce and things like that. So I'm delighted to be there, and I certainly deserve to be there. And let's hope that some of you end up there, because we have a lot of ex-Oxford educated people in the House of Lords, obviously.
The hand on the front row over here.
Thank you. What was the lowest point in your career, and how do you get over it?
Well, there's lots of highs and lows. I think, yeah, I mean, there was a period when my company had risen to be the largest manufacturer of computers in Europe, and because of, shall I say, a Volkswagen moment. No, it wasn't actually. No, we wasn't actually doing anything wrong. But the only thing we did wrong was we made a fatal error in some of the design of the products, and we went out of fashion very quickly. As quick as you built yourself the reputation, it started to go down, and we lost the market very, very quickly. But one had to pull out of that, and I'm always innovating, really. And fortunately, as one door closes, another one opens, and that's when I launched Sky Television with Rupert Murdoch, and it was a kind of another injection shot of adrenaline, if you like, to get me going again. But it was a bad time. It was a really poor time. You imagine being known as the biggest, manufacturer in Europe, and then suddenly it slumps and you lose the market. Virtually overnight. Within about 6 months or so, you'd lost the market completely. And the company was in a lot of debt. Not a lot of debt. The company had a lot of inventory, and we had to put a different hat on to make sure it didn't really go down the pan and recover and come out fighting. But there were some sad moments, and you just have to some real sad moments, and then jump out of bed in the morning, get in the shower, and I remember a friend of mine said, "Look, get up, put your suit on, shirt and tie, get in there and go for it again." And that's effectively what you have to do.
Just over here, right at the front.
In this day and age, it's obviously very difficult for youngsters to find a job with the prices and rising costs of university. So apologies for being very direct, but would there be any possibility of maybe getting some work experience of some sort?
I'm going to have to say no. Yes, look, it is difficult for youngsters these days. But I don't wish to alienate people here about what I'm about to say. But your destiny is in your hands. I succeeded because I had to. No one sorted anything out for me. I didn't ask to go to any government and said, pretty please, find me some work, please, and do something for me, because it was a waste of bloody time. Simply that, a waste of time. And if I was going to do something, I had to do it myself. That's it. And I would say to every one of you here, don't sit around relying upon magically some government going to create an environment that's going to make it easy for you to find work and find jobs. You've got to go out there and fight for it yourself. I'm sorry to say I can't give you any other form of advice. If you want something bad enough, you do it. And if you look at some of these wannabes that make themselves television stars or and pop stars and all that type of stuff, they have a desire to want to be famous, and they don't stop until they're recognised, and they do. And half the people that you see on television these days in the entertainment industry are those that had a determination that wanted to do it. And I'll add a little rider to that, none of them can bloody sing. Not helpful, right? I mean, you didn't find that a helpful answer, but you're going to control your destiny. I'm telling you, no one else is going to do it. Not unless you've got a rich dad. Have you got a rich dad? A rich uncle? No, well then that's it. You're going to have to do it yourself.
You mentioned Rupert Murdoch. How big a role do you think he has in British politics? How big an influence do you think he has?
Yeah, I mean, his newspapers did have a big influence in British politics. There's no question of it. I mean, I don't think they're as powerful now. Not because of Rupert Murdoch, but I just think of the demise of the printed media anyway is going down the pan, and it's not as powerful as it once was. But most certainly, the prime ministers, the past 4 or 5 prime ministers of this country made a beeline for seeing if they had Murdoch's support. Yeah, and like it or not, papers like The Sun and papers like the Sunday Times and the Times did have a kind of bit of clout about them. And if they decided to get behind whoever it was, Cameron, Brown, or whoever, Blair, it did have an influence. There's no question of it. I don't think it's got that much influence these days, actually, no.
First, thank you very much for being with us today. What is your view on international non-European workers in the UK?
If they are, well, you say non-European, when the European community expanded itself to places like Poland and all the other kind of ex-Eastern Bloc countries that became part of Europe, of course, we have to allow those people to come and work here in the same way as the British can go and work there. The non-Europeans, if they have work permits, have taken up jobs that British people don't want. And they do a good job. If you go to some places, some restaurants or even hospitals, you'll find a lot of non-European people working there. And I suppose you have to ask yourself, it's the work ethic, really. They're grateful for a job. They don't feel that the world owes them a living. And that's why they fill these positions. I mean, there was a period of time when the Polish workers would monopolize the building industry because no one else wanted to do it. And ask yourself, why don't you want to do it? Why doesn't, the traditional British person want to be a builder? I don't know, not cool, right? To have a hod of bricks on your shoulder running up a ladder. Someone has to do it because we've got to build houses. So they wanted the jobs, and that's it. Too many young people these days want to sit in an environment where they're the new tech world of wooden floors and bare ceilings, flicking elastic bands at each other in front of their computer screens, and aspiring to be another Zuckerberg. They wouldn't think of carrying a load of bricks in building a house, and these foreign workers will accept to do that work, that manual work. That's what's happened.
Speaking of fancy jobs, out of everyone in history, who would be your ideal apprentice?
Ideal apprentice? I think it's a. I don't want to call it a stupid question. So I'm trying to find I'm trying to find a more flattering word for it, but I don't know what you're talking about, quite frankly.
Is there anyone you'd like to have worked with?
Well, I would have liked to work a bit longer with Arnold Weinstock. He was the boss of a company called GEC at the time. He was a genius in the electronics industry. I met Bill Gates many times. In fact, he actually came to my home. It would have been nice to have worked a bit more with him. This is in the days when we were top of the tree on the computer industry. Steve Jobs, I met him a few times. It'd be nice perhaps to have been in his head a little bit more, but you see the ones that have succeeded the most, the electronics and in the electronics industry in this new world that we live in. We have to be realistic. It's all in America, and I lived in England, apart from I think Dyson, the vacuum cleaner fellow, that charges exorbitant amounts of money for his vacuum cleaners. If you look at all the big successes of Apple, Microsoft, and Facebook, and Amazon, and all that stuff, it's American investment that made it possible. So if I was brought back into this world again, perhaps if I was born in California, I would have been, it would have been a better place for me to grow my businesses in.
Do you think the increased use of technology like Facebook and things will limit the youth of this era to their creativity and ability to become entrepreneurs?
Well, I mean, you could argue whether this technology is a useful tool to assist people to become entrepreneurs. I mean, the growth of the peripheral industry around the smartphone, for example, is quite amazing. And you look at the whole of a section of London in the kind of Shoreditch area, where there's so many small companies writing apps and things like that, and they are entrepreneurs. I don't know how they do it. I go around there looking at these people and I think to myself, you've got 20 people working in a room beavering away, and I'm wondering, and paying outrageous rents of £50, £60 a square foot. They have expensive of maybe, I don't know, £100,000 a year, and I'm wondering what is it you're all churning out? Because it's those places, those factories that I remember 50 years ago, were people machining and making textiles, and you could see a physical product. You know, you could see some dresses coming off the line, or some coats, or some suits, or something. And here they're all working on something, I don't know, whatever they're working on. And so there's plenty of entrepreneurs there. Certainly, high-speed communication now, it's quite amazing. If I go back 30 or 40 years, I mean, I was at the leading edge of, I'm a great communicator, right? So 24/7, you get hold of me. And that's not just now, that was always. I had the first steam-driven fax machine, about that big when they first came out, and a way of sending messages across the world. And all my offices in the world had these big kind of washing machines, if you like, and that's how we communicated all the time. Take that as an example of when we wanted to, one of the problems that we had in the early days of manufacturing, considering we were used in places like China and Japan, is our draftsman would come up with a drawing, and then to get that drawing over to that part of the world in order to produce the part would take maybe 10 days by express airmail or something like that. The days before DHL, FedEx and all that stuff. Then came along a fax machine, this great big steam-driven thing, with paper that went in about that wide. And of course you were able to photocopy a massive, great big drawing in 20 pieces, stick it down and send it across, and within minutes, some bloke in Japan has got the thing and he's cutting it up and sticking it together. And that's the evolution of technology that we live through. It sounds very archaic, but that's the way things have evolved. Now, of course, it's straight from the CAD straight from the CAD system on your computer onto the machine that actually makes the stuff. It's a wonderful, wonderful era we're in. I don't know where it's going and what more can come out of it, but certainly it's open for exploitation by people that understand the technology and to use it to their best ability to progress in some way or another.
Thank you. When you have so many different roles and responsibility in this society, how would you divide your time so effectively, and do you still have time to relax?
Well, do you know, when you come from the working class background that I come from, I feel guilty at 10 to 5 if I'm not in the office. I know that might sound strange to you, but there's a work ethic that I have to be half dead not to not go to work. It's a kind of a work ethic that's built into me, yeah. But nevertheless, having said all that, the weekends, that was it. It's over. Switch off like Friday night, as you got back from the office or from the work or from the factory or whatever. It doesn't matter what was buzzing around in my head. It was off like a light switch, and that's it. Don't let it interfere. Very rarely let it interfere with the weekend. And then Monday morning, bang, back on it again as if you flick the switch on again. So I think that was a bit of discipline in that respect, yeah?
Do you think there's still a particularly noticeable gender imbalance in top business roles? And if so, do you have any...
Sorry, ma'am. I was looking at the bottle of water here. Could you? I can't multitask in that way. Could you?
I'll stop doing
Could you say again?
Do you think there's still a particularly noticeable gender imbalance in top business roles? And if so, do you have any particular reason as to why that might be?
Well, it's an ongoing debate about women not having top roles in business. And yeah, I mean, facts are, you're right. That is it. It is a fact of life. Do people like me or anybody else, do we go out of our way to say, oh no, can't entertain you, you're a woman? No, it's not like that. It's the people that put themselves forward to want to take up the roles, to want to take up the jobs, tend to still be the majority still seem to be men. I've had some fantastic women that work for me, unbelievable. The lady that ran my French operation, she was a real killer, that one, honestly. She was unbelievable. And also my personal assistant for about 15 years was a Chinese lady by the name of Callan So. Brilliant computer brain. She kind of knew everything that was going on. Right now I have a business partner by the name of Susan Ma. She is, well, fantastic really in what she does. She manufactures cosmetics and sells them and does this kind of social selling type of thing. I don't have a problem with it, and I don't, but to be fair, I've always worked in my own company. So I've never been a part of a giant organisation. I've never worked for, you know, a giant organisation like Shell or BP or something like that as a corporate type of person. So perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps I don't see things in the way that things go on in the real world. I've been my own boss since I was 18 years old, and anybody can come and work for me, anybody. And I welcome anybody to come along. In Denmark, it was a great eye-opener for me when I bought the mobile phone company in Denmark that, and I'm going to admit this openly, that walking around inside the laboratory, I saw women. And I said to the guys, what's these young ladies doing? They said, well, they're software engineers. And we're talking about 20-odd years, 25 years ago. And I must admit, it was a bit of a shock to me. Software, oh really? Software engineers? And what's that lady do? What are they doing now? She's a hardware engineer. And I thought, right, yeah, why not? You know, why not? And it was a bit of a wake-up call for me, quite honestly. But in England, when we advertised for hardware engineers to design microchips and things like that, we weren't inundated with lots of women. We're inundated with blokes that have done it before, and they got the jobs, not because of who they were or the gender, it was because those were the ones that were coming forward.
What are your feelings on your American Apprentice counterpart, Donald Trump?
What did you call him? Sorry, first of all, my American counterpart. Yeah, no, he's not my counterpart, dear. I can promise you. The only thing we have in common is we're both men. I think. No, I mean, look. Well, at the moment, he's no longer doing The Apprentice. As you know, he's on the road trying to be elected as the candidate for. Is it the Republican Party? Yeah. And you're talking about America. Anything can happen, right? So I know it doesn't make much sense, and it sounds highly unlikely, but anything can happen. Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, was the something of California, wasn't he? Or what was he of California? Anyway, he was the boss of California, so to speak. He's now taken over from Mr. Trump in the American version of The Apprentice. He's not as good as me. Trump was never as good as me. Albeit that the program started there, first of all. He's definitely not in my class, there's no question of it.
What do we have to look forward to in the new series of The Apprentice coming out on Wednesday?
More characters, new people, new tasks. Claude Littner, of course, has taken the role of Nick. Nick is, after 10 years of running around, he's 71 years old. He decided that enough's enough. And because it's very hard work for him and for Karen. And he said he just couldn't face any more because it was really, really hard work. So Claude is someone to look forward to, if you could look forward to Claude. What's the success of this program? It's 11 years, it's the 11th series, and its success is because every year a new bunch of candidates come along. And the thing that I insist upon is that we do not tinker with what we call the format. The format's the same. We have 12 or 11 business tasks. They're all virtually the same theme. We either make something, we sell something, we produce something, we make a TV advert, we sell to retailers, we go and buy goods. Okay, so we go to France or we go to somewhere else, but it's all basically the same. But it's the individuals really, and it's the whole new bunch of individuals that I think the audience likes to see. For me, why do I do it? Which may anticipate your next question. I changed the format after I think it was the 6th series into one where I wanted to try and demonstrate at the crash, when the whole world collapsed, financial world collapsed, that we could start a business virtually from scratch. And the last 4 candidates, the last 4 winners are in business with me, and they're all doing very, very well, employing people. We started with £250,000. That is an absolute. That's the absolute truth. The minute they win, a company's formed, £250,000 goes in the company, that's it. As I say on the programme, I'm not going to do any work, you're going to do the work, I'll be there as a kind of a mentor. And that's why I get the kick out of that, is going back to the old days of when I was 18, starting a business from scratch. So I've got 4 little businesses at the moment, and I'm sure and I will have a 5th one by the end of this year with the winner of this series.
Claude seems almost as intimidating as you, maybe even more so. Is there a danger of him overshadowing you in the programme?
Hardly a danger, I think, of that. I don't think so. I mean, look, Claude's worked with me for about 25 years. And, sometimes when you work with somebody, you tend to pick up their traits, really. So maybe something's rubbed off of me onto him, you never know. But he's all right. He's a very nice chap, actually. He's a very, very nice, charming fellow and a very good family man and very loyal, very serious chap and very fair.
The gentleman standing up by the wall.
Do you think shows like Apprentice have genuinely a positive impact on entrepreneurship?
You mean the program?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because your program is immensely successful. I love it. We all watch it, but we haven't seen big success.
Well, okay, I think I get what you're saying, but look, you see, I feel like I'm in the boardroom, the candidate there. No, I think I know where you're coming from. Okay, the thing is that you like the program, and I guess that you like it because you think it's entertaining, and you like looking at somebody who you might think is a right numpty, and that's what makes, and that's why you like it. What you don't realise in the back of your mind is that you are picking up some of the business message that is there. Okay. Now there was well, you might not admit it, but you are. Okay. And I can tell you that from when I started doing this apprentice thing, the amount of young people that are inspired by the program, put aside all the fun and the laughter and all the clowns that you think you've come across, the amount of people that are inspired by it, the amount of people that where they are put to me their business ideas, and I think it performs a very, very good service amongst the young, to be honest with you. And you can't get a better endorsement of it when it becomes part of the curriculum at some schools, where they set up a mini kind of apprentice task. And the amount of times that I've been asked to attend schools to try and judge them, I just couldn't do them. There's enough time in the day. So yes, it does inspire people. It entertains and it inspires. You are too young to remember the previous attempts of business programs on the BBC. Were very, very, very heavy going, and very, very well. They were heavy going. They were interesting to a hardcore business person that would look out of interest. It would like BBC Two, 10 o'clock at night type programs, where they weren't entertaining and it didn't attract the young. So I think it performs a very, very good service. And so much so that the governments have wanted me to be, what they call the apprentice ambassador, because the governments require recruitment of apprentices. Obviously they would like to ask me to assist them in that way. I'm of course obliged by the BBC to ensure that I don't bring into the BBC programme any kind of political bias whatsoever. So I have to be very careful as to using the BBC's branding in that sense. But yes, it does. I believe it inspires people. You may think it's just rather jolly entertainment. But I'm sure that you pick up the reasoning behind each task, I think, right? Or not?
I think so, but at the same
Good,
time...
that's enough then, thank you.
Lord Sugar, apart from business, and you're an incredibly interesting person as a businessman, what do you really like in life, apart from firing people? Do you really hate something very much? Do you love something very much? Is anything in particular that you like to be remembered when you go?
I'm an okay fellow. Yeah, I'm really, really easygoing, okay chap. And if you look at some of the profile of my employees, in fact, it was my pleasure this week to award one of my employees for 33 years of service, and I've got other people there that have been there, believe it or not, 40-odd years of service. All the people that work around me have been there on an average of over 15 years, apart from new recruits that have come in. So, and the thing about me is this. Here's something for you to think about. If I had any skeletons in my cupboard, the newspaper that's most probably sitting amongst you today would have had me on their front pages, back pages, middle pages, quarter pages. I'm just an ordinary bloke that came from Hackney that did well. And that's it. That's what I'm proud of being.
I think we've got time perhaps for two more quick questions. Can we go with the lady on the front row towards the door?
I'm all right for time. I just don't want to disturb your partying afterwards.
When you were 18, what was your aspiration?
It follows on the lines of this gentleman here, where I said to him that my aspirations were to be self-sufficient and provide for myself. Was it electronics? I don't know. I was interested in electronics in school, in physics and things like that, so maybe I tumbled into that area. It kind of fascinated me a little bit. But did I ever believe I'd be the largest manufacturer in computers in the country, in Europe? No. What I wanted to be was a self-sufficient individual that didn't have to rely upon anybody else.
Well, you've gone from looking out of windows at classrooms to having a very regimented timetable on the weekends. How did you develop such a good self-discipline?
I don't know. I am very disciplined. That's all I can say to you. Very, very disciplined. A creature of habit. What's that thing? Is it called OCD or something like that? Yeah. If you look at my desk, you'll see all the pens lined up like that, and the piece of paper over here, and the cup over there, and all that stuff. I am just very disciplined. That's it. And I think in business and in life, I've work on the principle of clear my desk every minute or every day, so answer emails immediately, answer people's questions immediately. That's been my success in running my company, that I'm there to, like a springboard, if you like, for employees to tell me what their issue is, and then to give them a quick resolution or to it so they can get on and deal with it. So that's my discipline, and I would heartily recommend it to all of you. If you decide to become, you should be disciplined. You should discipline yourself, because it's not a bad way of life. People take the mickey out of me, of course, over it, but there you are.
What do you think about investing in emerging economies, say like India? What do you think would be the best sectors to invest in those markets?
Well, I'm a great admirer of the Indian economy. As you know, particularly in technology, they've grown rapidly. And in fact, behind the scenes, a lot of the software that exists in the products that we use in our everyday life now comes out of India. Yeah, I think it's not an emerging economy. I think it is. I think it's a booming economy there, together with, like China, for example. So I take my hat off to the Indian people. I think the point is that it's whether it can spread outwardly across the whole country, so that the rest of the population can enjoy the prosperity brought about, I guess, should be brought about by learning. And if you could share more learning amongst the population in India, then more people can become actively employed in technology, manufacturing, and all that stuff. Yeah, I think it's a great emerging market.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for this evening. At the end of the Piers Morgan event, we asked him, how do you think you've done? So in a similar vein...
Well, I've done better than him.
Done better than him?
There's no question.
Would you hire yourself or fire yourself?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you haven't asked me the question that everybody normally asks, is that if I applied for The Apprentice, would I win? And the answer is yes.
Obviously. We don't want to be cliched.
No, right, okay.
Lord Sugar, it's been a true privilege and honour. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Lord Sugar very much.